Do you have a dream that is a small seed of an idea and it's ready to sprout?
Or are you in the workplace weeds and you need to bloom in a new creative way?
Perhaps you're ready to embrace and grow a more vibrant, joyful, and authentic life. If you answered yes to any of these, you are ready to rebloom. Welcome to the podcast where we have enlightening chats with nature lovers, makers, and artisans as they share inspiring stories about pivoting to a heart-centered passion.
Hello, I'm Lori Siebert, and I am very curious to hear from friends and artisans about the creativity that blooms when you follow your heart.
And I'm Jamie Jameson, and I want to dig deep into the why behind each courageous leap of faith and walk through new heart-centered gardens.
Each episode of ReBloom will be an in-depth conversation with guests who, through self-discovery, shifted to share their passions with the world.
Get ready to find your creative joy as we plant the seeds for you to rebloom. So welcome everyone to our ReBloom podcast, where nature lovers, makers, and artisans share their stories about pivoting and reblooming. I am Jamie Jameson.
And I'm Lori Siebert.
And today we have the incredible honor of welcoming Lucy Hunter to our podcast. Hello, Lucy.
Hello.
Hi, Lucy.
Hi.
Great to see you.
And you.
Welcome all the way from Wales. How is life in Wales right now?
It's quite wet. It's quite dark. I'm not going to lie. I'm in the middle of winter, but actually the sun's coming out and the light's quite beautiful this afternoon. So all is good.
Don't we love a little beautiful light, especially in the middle of winter? Well, thank you for joining us. So before we dive in and start asking you some questions about how you've bloomed and rebloomed, I want to give everyone just a little bit of background about you. So Lucy and I have been friends on Instagram since, I swear, the beginning of Instagram. Wouldn't you say, Luce?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so. Lucy Hunter, she goes by Lucy the Flower Hunter on Instagram, and you must check out her beautiful florals. If you are on Instagram, they are incredible. She describes herself as a visual storyteller, and she is passionate about florals and garden art. You will see that in her beautiful work. We would describe her as a creator of magnificent floral magic, both in the garden and when she creates her beauty of nature and flowers in her photos. Her photography is stunning. Not to mention, she is the sweetest person. Oh my gosh. I was so fortunate to take a workshop with you and meet you in person. That's the beauty of real life social media too. Sometimes you get to meet people that you've met along the way. And so today we want to talk with her about how she has bloomed and rebloomed. Her work and her style is very British and has a very natural quality to it. She went to university in Liverpool, and she has over 20 years of experience in it as a landscape designer. She's won some incredible awards. She's been part of the Chelsea Flower Show. That is a goal, definitely a life goal. A self-taught photographer, and now a best-selling author. Did you ever think that was going to be a title for you?
Absolutely not. No. None of the above. None of the above.
Well, let's dive in. So let's start with, first of all, everybody has, and we kind of break it down to plants and to growing. We have roots. Tell us a little bit about your roots. Did you grow up in the country? Did you grow up loving gardening? Tell us a little bit about your roots.
So my roots, I grew up actually in the southeast of London, so real in the middle of suburbia. And we lived in a fairly modest, semi-detached Edwardian house, as you go in London, in South London. And it was lovely. It was just quite a small family, so it was just my parents and my sister, my younger sister and myself. We had a garden, but my parents certainly were not gardeners. I mean, it was just literally, they both worked really hard and full time. And it was literally trying to keep the lawns looking respectable and, hacking the... But my grandmother, so my father's mother, had been widowed in the war, so she'd been on her own for a long, long time. And my sister and I used to spend quite a lot of time with her, probably from a childcare point of view. But she had a garden, and it was completely wild and woolly. I think my father was a bit, gosh, it's completely untamed, and it's not great, is it? And I just loved it. There was just like this wonderland, and we would have weekends, and we'd all go arms down to the bottom of the garden in the undergrowth and try and hack back to make some paths, and it was just being outside, and I just adored it. But I kind of ignored those were times when I spoke with her, and then I knew that I always loved being outside. I rode horses for years and years. Couldn't afford a horse, but I spent all my time down the stables as a child, sort of mucking out stables in lieu of a free ride at the end of the day. And so I always wanted to be outside. But yeah, so no, I didn't move to the country until I met my husband, actually, until we got married. So a long time later.
And your love of nature took you to university. Did you study horticulture in the university? No. No, not at all. And it was funny, actually. I was talking to my husband in the garden last weekend. What would you do if you had your time again? And would you do the same thing? And he was like, no, probably. He's an engineer, so he's quite sort of straight down the line. And I was like, I don't know that I would. I think I would have possibly done. So I know I ignored horticulture. I didn't see, and it's such a shame, I think, and I think it's changing now. But when I was growing up in the sort of the late 80s, being a gardener it certainly wasn't something that my parents wanted for me. It wasn't seen as an amazing career. It wasn't seen as, they wanted that proper job. They wanted working in a bank, or, I was never clever enough. I was never going to be a doctor or a lawyer or anything like that. I was always creative. But a gardener just was not on the tick list at all. So I kind of ignored that.
Doesn't that happen a lot to people?
It really does. And I think because I was so aware of it, I tried to steer my son, away from that. But I think as society, we're just driven to be productive, aren't we? It's such a capitalist society. So it's, we've got to do things that make money, and actually being creative, you can make a really good living, but I'm sure we'll come to that later. But, at the time it was sort of, you've got to be at the desk, you've got to be answering emails, you've got to be working 9 to 5, you can't. But saying that, my parents were really supportive, and they knew I was creative. So I went to Liverpool and did a fine art degree. So I wafted around for 3 years, looking angst, as sort of, that age group do, 19 to 21, drinking probably far too much beer, and not being very productive at all, actually, but having a really great
arty.
time.
You're probably being arty.
Really arty. I had these amazing dungarees that I would just splatter with paint and feel very cool as I sort of wafted around. So that was really good. I did enjoy it, but do you know what? Gosh, I wish I could go back and do it again now. In my 50s, I just think I would get so much more out of it now.
Oh, isn't I think that I would too? Oh, yeah. I remember being in Paris when I was 16, and I chose to go to Pizza Pino's instead of the Louvre because I wanted to hang out with my friends. You're young and dumb, but...
You are, but you can't put, what is it the saying, the cliche, you can't put old heads on young shoulders, can you?
Yeah.
But I do wonder whether actually people shouldn't go to university at all at 18, but actually go in their 50s, because I think everybody would get so much more out of it.
I think that's an idea.
I think we definitely should. And having been a college instructor for the past 18 years, I can tell you a little pause is good. And because it's interesting. I think you grow up, certainly, and you have exposure to things. But I would also, do you think that set a foundation for you as far as art is concerned and in your visual eye, even though you were maybe drinking a little?
Well, it depends. Yes, I do. I think I think at the time, I sort of came out of university and actually went to work for a bank. So I followed the route. And I was like, well, that was a bit of a waste of time, and I didn't paint for years. I actually didn't paint again properly until COVID.
Oh, wow.
So a long time, gosh, I mean, I went when I was 18 and I'm 50 now. So, a long, long time passed before I picked up paintbrushes, properly immersed myself. And that's probably to do with time and all sorts, as well as, maybe not thinking I was good enough to do it and allowing myself to do it. But it was always there. Yeah, definitely. And I think that led me because, so I went to work for this bank and absolutely hated it. I mean, it really was not creative in the slightest. And I was inside and I was doing everything I'd always said I didn't want to do. I was sat there looking at a computer screen in a high-rise block, dealing with money. It was just death to the soul. But I was being productive, so I was very successful. So,
and your parents were happy for a hot moment. Yeah. But what made you pivot? What made you say, enough of this? Enough. I need really to be creative.
Unhappy. Yeah. I was really unhappy.
How long did you do? How long did you?
I did it for 7 years.
Really?
Oh, wow.
So I got the job. I must have been early 20s. I came basically straight out of university and thought, gosh, well, what do I do now? I had decided that I wasn't going to ever make money from art because I wasn't good enough as a painter. And I needed to I did need to earn some money. I was up in the north of the country. My parents were still down in London. And I could have gone home, and we have a fantastic relationship, but I decided I wanted to stay in the north. I actually think I had a bit of a dodgy boyfriend at the time that I was to stay with. But, and I had no money. I was so poor. I remember my mum sending me supermarket food vouchers to, through the post, to sort of feed me, but I was determined. And then I met my husband eventually. And then I had Matthew, my little boy, who's not very little now. But I needed to do something, going to the bank was just making it, I just knew it was so wrong. It was just making me so miserable. I had to find something that could make me a better mum, make me a happier mum, make me want to get out in bed in the morning.
So were you doing creative things on the side of that?
Well, I was trying to. I always wanted to take photographs, but at the time there were no digital cameras. I mean, we're going back a bit, early 90s. So you remember when you used to take your films to the super.
Yeah.
Did you do that in the States?
Sure, absolutely.
And it would be developed, and you'd have to wait a week, and then it would come back, and there'd be stickers over it saying "try harder" is out of focus. But there was none of that. You were sort of, I loved it, and I dreamt of being able to do. I used to love the the interior magazines and the garden magazines, and I dreamt of being able to create images. I had no idea how to do it, no idea at all. So I would sort of try and take photographs of chairs in the garden, the most horrendous photographs ever. But so there was always something in me that wanted to create a story or create something. Like my brain was always thinking. But we moved to a little tiny cottage and had a tiny garden. And then suddenly I just decided, we went to a garden show. It was one of the very first. So it's the same show as the Chelsea Flower Show, but they opened one in the north called Tatton Park. So it's an RHS show, and I remember dragging Richard, my husband, along to this. This was actually just before we had Matthew. And oh my goodness, I was like a child in a sweetie shop. Suddenly I was, sort of all of these flowers, looking incredible because it was July, so there were just so many of them. So, I just wanted to buy all these flowers and then plant them. And so I did. I bought a lot and killed most of them because I had no idea, I had no training or anything at all. But it set me alight. There was a flame inside me then. I felt curious and wanted to learn more. So I
wonder if that goes back to when you were talking about your grandmother's garden and how you felt there. I often feel like things that light us up when we're children if we can stay connected to that somehow through our lives, that's our true passion. And I bet you just, that was awakened again in you. I think
that's so true. And I think my grandmother, she was a gardener, but she was also a creative, and she was always she was always creating. We used to this is terrible, I'm sure it's completely awful, but we used to melt tiny bits of old candles in pans on the stove. And then we would take them out. And we must have been sort of 6 or 7, my sister and I. So we would make wax fruits, and then we would make a little shop front. And Sylvie, my sister and I, we would sit there and we would sell our fruits, and she'd come along with a basket. And it was pure make-believe, but oh my goodness. And going back to being able to take yourself completely into a different story, take yourself completely out of that day, and you're just totally immersed in doing. And I think that stayed with me all of my life. I've always been searching to try and reproduce that feeling again, I think. Yeah.
And it's interesting. I think when you're in nature, I think when you're in a garden, I think when I'm behind the camera and I'm with my flowers, and I would bet you feel the same way, you're just lost. You're lost as if you're creating those wax fruit. It's just, to me, it's just very serene, and there's no judgment. You can do whatever you want to do. You can have fun with it. And I think deep down that creativity is within all of us. And when it gets shut down, that's when we feel sad. And the happiest I am is when I can just be, let that creativity bubble up and just be.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I love watching our grandsons, because they just play and they don't get in their own way, and their little brains, the way they work. And so, I always feel like, gosh, if everyone could just stay connected to themselves as they were as children, because there's just no judgment. It's just all about having fun and exploring.
Yeah, there's no limits, are there? There's nobody to say, no, that's wrong. You're just following whatever feels right to you.
And, I think that that's so critical, because I think when we feel like there's going to be judgment or someone's going to say no, then we stop. But it sounds as if on your path, and I know that I've spoken to Lori about this and on mine too, we just went ahead. You just went ahead and you're just like, hey, I'm just going to create. And so by doing that, Lucy, by just pushing forward, then what unfolded? What bloomed for you? What opened up for you just by growing your garden? How did you start? Did you start with a garden, and then did you start with the photos, or which came first, the flowers or the photos?
No. The photos have come very recently. I would say the photos have only really come since I discovered Instagram, so 5 years ago. So no, the gardens came first. And because I think at the time, because there was no social media, and because it wasn't easy with the digital cameras to just play and play and play and play. You were always limited. And I was still very much in the mindset that I had to be professionally trained to do something like that. To become a photographer, I would have to then go back to college and learn how to be a photographer, which I would now totally argue against. But that's
well, I think that's another thing that stops people. I think that mindset, like, I can't paint unless I've been formally trained. Right. And sometimes the best things come from when you aren't trained and you're just going with your heart.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because you cannot teach a visual eye. You cannot teach. If you see something or you're able to create something, that's in your heart. That's not something that someone can show you. I mean, you can understand certain aspects of design, but really your creations come from your heart and your soul. And that's what I believe comes out in your work, because you can see that creativity coming out of your photos, and the flowers, that everything that you select is from your heart.
I'm curious, Lucy. So oftentimes I think, like, you have to experience a certain pain point to really make a change. And it sounded like you were pretty miserable when you were in the banking world. Like, do you feel like that pain kind of made you want to make changes and pivot?
I would have been, gosh, if I continued in the bank doing what I was doing, I think I would have just, I don't know, really at all. You know, I felt there was so much more out there that I just wasn't exploring. And I have to thank my husband really at that point. And I guess, I think so many of us get stuck doing actually what we weren't designed to do because of, you know, because we do need to pay the mortgage and we do need to, you know, all of those practical things that, you know, and to possibly give it up and suddenly become just paint is pretty scary, isn't it? And it stops a lot of people, and I completely understand that. So I was lucky in that I had the support of Richard to say, because I just wanted to be outside, and I thought, well, maybe I can design gardens, maybe I can sort of, you know, put my creativity and I can match it with the outside. And he said, do it. You know, I've got your back effectively. We can manage this. Obviously,
that's incredible.
You do need to work. And it's going to, but because I did, you know, it wasn't that I could just give up everything, but he was happy for me to give it a go. So I did. And a friend of mine had Matthew 1 day a week. She just looked after him, which was really brilliant. And I went back to college. I did go back to college because there were certain things that I did need to understand, and I did need to, you know, so the formal things of actually, you know, becoming
not how
a
to kill
designer.
the plant, not how to kill the flowers, probably.
Yeah, that helped. You know, I had no training at all with that. It was more to do with actually how to run a business, and how to do site surveys, and you know, all of those things. But the flowers, I learned through trial and error. I mean, I really learned the business over by being a bit belligerent and wanting to do it. And the thought, and I remember standing I remember this so clearly. I remember standing one day in the garden and it was absolutely bitter. And I think I was planting up for a client because I don't do quite so much now, but I would do all the planting myself of these gardens. And I was so cold, and my back hurt, and all I could think was I could be in the bank. I'm absolutely freezing cold. What on earth am I doing? So much better than being in the bank, you know. So that kind of, you know, that kind of kept me going really. But it was, and then the garden design I thought I'd just get one tiny little job a month, and that'll be as much, because I was working part time at the bank by then, because I was, you know, looking after Matthew at home, and my husband worked offshore. So I was on my own a lot. He would go away for 6 to 8 weeks at a time. And I think that was another reason why I almost craved, you know, social interaction from other adults as well, rather than being completely on my own. But, and I just thought, well, I'll just do one tiny little job a month and that'll be the same. And it just kind of ballooned. It just kept going and just got bigger and bigger. And suddenly it turned into quite a good business, really, without me trying very hard. It just happens.
Well, but it happened through some really incredible hard work. I mean, I think that's the other thing. I think people look sometimes at folks who have achieved success and they think, oh, this happened overnight. I mean, you're telling us a story that happened over many years, but it was all along you following your passion and following your heart, which I think you may not know the end result. You may not know what's going to bloom at the end, but you just know deep down that you're going in the right direction. Let's take a quick minute and thank our amazing sponsors. Our podcast is proudly brought to you today by Jet Creative and UrbanStems. Jet Creative is a women-owned marketing firm committed to community and empowerment since 2013. Are you ready to rebloom and build a website or start a podcast? Visit jetcreative.com/podcast to kickstart your journey. They will help you bloom in ways you never imagined. And bonus, our listeners get an exclusive discount when you mention ReBloom. And a huge thanks to UrbanStems, your go-to and our go-to source for fresh, gorgeous bouquets and gifts delivered coast to coast. Use Bloom Big 20 and save 20% on your next order. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at ReBloom Podcast. Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to you for joining us today. When did you pivot to photography? How did that happen?
Instagram. So to cut a long story short, effectively the garden design grew and grew and grew. And then in about 2012, 2013, I landed a huge job with a client who had bought 27 acres of potato fields. Very rich, wealthy client in Manchester, not a footballer. And he
that
just
would be
said,
soccer for us Americans.
yeah. It wasn't Manchester United. Yeah. It wasn't David Beckham.
It wasn't David. Okay.
No, it would have been good if it had.
It would have been nice. You might not have been a photographer.
Quite still be there. So anyway, this job, and very wealthy, so the budget was, and he said, make me a garden. So I've got a landscaping team, not my team. We're not financially connected, but we work together, and we'd work together on, so all these landscapes. So we did, and it took 4 years, and huge. And I learned so much. But at the end of it, it was like all you could possibly wish for, because there's no budget, whatever I thought was sort of whims of fancy, potentially I could sort of implement. But by the end of it, like any big businesses, suddenly it become about the business rather than being creative. So, I wasn't looking at flowers anymore. I wasn't getting any joy from actually designing because it was 24/7. And it was, when you're talking about large sums of money, then it all becomes very serious and a bit scary and anxiety inducing and everything else. So eventually the job finished, and it was brilliant, and it won awards, and it was amazing. But I felt absolutely burnt out and almost not really in love with gardens at all anymore. And I think that was just because I was burnt out. I just couldn't see it. And I didn't really know where that was going to lead, because in 4 years I'd ignored everybody else. I'd sort of put all my eggs in one basket. And I thought, oh gosh, what now? And about the same time, I started to notice Instagram. I was like, what is this? And then my sister, who's a couple of years younger than me, she'd been with her partner for a long time. They've got a little boy, but they decided to get married. And she said, Lucy, you can do my wedding flowers. It was just going to be a really small, a wedding. And I was like, oh my goodness. Oh yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to do. Yeah. I want to do. Do I want to be a florist? Maybe I do want to be a florist. Maybe that's. And again, my grandmother had done floristry. So
interesting. It went right back to her.
It went right back to her, and she'd never done it she'd never had a shop or anything like that at all. She'd almost played at it really, but she had still done it. And I was like, why am I so slow? Why have I never put these two? Why have I never thought about floristry? No idea. Still don't know. So I then decided I needed to be professionally trained. Still got that thing, you see, still hasn't gone. Yeah. So I went off to London.
We all have that imposter. We have that imposter syndrome. It's even if you've been trained, I think, it's a thing. But keep going. Thing. Yes, yeah.
Well, so I thought, right. So I went off to London with my little satchel at some of the big London flower schools, and I won't tell you the names, but some big London flower schools, and I couldn't understand it because I was so excited because I love flowers. I've always been outside the garden, but they were using these stiff, scentless blooms that barely resembled roses, or tropical things that just had no relation whatsoever to, and I was just, I don't want to. And a lot of the people there had no idea what they were working with at all. And I thought, oh, that's all a bit sad. I don't really want to work with those. Why can't I bring the outside? Why can't I bring that in? Yeah. And then again, Instagram was still there. And in America, you were so much further ahead than we are in the UK, as always. And there were some incredible florists on there that were, Sarah Winwood Arianas Rizals, like, you know, who were doing, and I would watch them and think, oh, that's it. That's, you know, that's what I want to do. I want to bring the outside in. I want to make a tiny version of the gardens I've been out doing outside. I want to bring that inside.
Oh, I love that.
So I just kind of shot myself. Or we had the other part of the house. We had a drawing room. Terribly posh. Called it the drawing room. But Mum and Dad would only come at Christmas. You know, we'd only use it once a year. You know.
Yeah.
It was never used. It was ridiculous. So we took the carpets up, put a wooden floor down, brought in a big table, and it turned it into my studio. And it was fabulous. I just loved it. I would just shut myself away in there. I was still doing garden design at that point. You know, they had started again slowly, but just little small jobs. But I gave myself time, and then I would photograph them. And I had quite a standard Canon. They called it their amateur range, which I always think is really rude. But I just had a little Canon camera at the time. I just took a few photographs. And I had no followers on Instagram. And I was like, well, I'll just put them on. Doesn't matter. Nobody's going to see it anyway. And I just pleased myself. And I think that's the happiest I have ever been. Loved it. Just as you were saying, Janie, I was completely immersed in just having a lovely time. Absolutely loved it.
Were you growing your flowers and photographing them? Were you doing?
I was growing the flowers. I mean, I wouldn't actually say I'm a very good gardener, particularly. I'm all about the visual. So yes, I do grow, but I grow so much. I spend so much time with other people in their gardens that mine tends to get a bit neglected, really. But I've got a friend who I found again. I'd known her when we had lived in our tiny cottage, because we'd moved then from our tiny cottage in the meantime to North Wales. We were in Chester, which is between Manchester and Liverpool. And we'd moved from there to where we live now on the side of the mountain in North Wales. And I'd lost touch with a friend that I'd made years and years before back in Chester. But I found her again, or she found me actually on Instagram, and said, I'm growing flowers. I'm planning on doing, making a thing of it. Why don't you come and visit me? So I did. And that was Carol Siddle, Carol's Garden, who's been huge in everything I do. And she grows she's only growing on an acre, so it's not huge, but she grows beautiful flowers. So I go and buy hers.
We floral photographers all need a good floral farmer. And I have one. Yeah. I went and knocked on my friend Tara's, and I knocked on her door and I said, hi, you grow flowers. I take pictures of flowers. Let's be friends. So, and it's been a 8-year friendship, but it's so, I think going back to what you said about Instagram, there was such a purity about it that I think it's creating without the fear that anybody's going to judge you. And I think initially when we started, you and I started at the same time doing it, I had no idea either. And I'm like, I just want to take pictures of flowers and antiques. But it's also bringing your beautiful style in. And I loved you sharing your story of bringing the outside in, because I think when you look at the palette that you pulled together, when you look at the whimsy that you arrange, it's both the natural outside that you've brought inside, but there's an artistic eye there that goes back to your days. I think those early days too, and it sort of all comes together. And so maybe at uni you learned a little bit more than you remember.
And do you know what was really funny? Actually, not that long ago, I was looking through some old photographs from the chemist, and I came across my graduation, my final exhibition photographs. And all my work that I've ever done has always been big. I've always sort of drawn big mural, even at uni. But they were all landscapes. And in my exhibition, there's a hanging basket. And I planted this hanging basket because I'd taken inspiration. And it was awful. I mean, it was a brown plastic hanging basket, and it had... But obviously, there was something there, even when I was 18, that was... it was like, and I've almost taken that and ignored it and tried to ignore it because it wasn't good enough for such a long time. But somehow it's crept back in. Somehow it's, So no, you're absolutely right.
I think there's a part of it, but I think it's just, and that's the part when we speak with people. I know you're now traveling a lot because you're doing workshops. And I would bet you travel and see a lot of, and talk with a lot of gentlemen and women. what advice would you give to them about following their passion and reblooming and doing what they want to do? What would you say to them on their journey?
Well, I'd always encourage them to follow their dreams, always. I mean, it's quite difficult sometimes when you have people say, you know, I want to do this and I've got a dream, but I've got to pay these bills. I've got, you know, so you have got those practicalities. You can't just tell people to leave the whole job and just it'll be fine and work out, because it doesn't. And you do have to work. I think every time you pivot, you have, because I feel that I'm pivoting now again, and I'm working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day at the minute. You know,
what are you pivoting to do now? Can you share with us?
Wow.
Something special. Okay. All right. Well, that's exciting. Well, but let's also talk about the book, because, you know, people also think that it's very easy to write a book, and you are now a best-selling author of 2 beautiful, beautiful books, which we will share in our show notes, because if you don't have them, you should have them. But as you pivoted from doing landscape to doing photography, and then all of a sudden these books have happened. Tell us about those pivots.
Well, they happened. The first one happened in COVID. You know, COVID. So COVID was hideous, obviously, for so many people. But I was incredibly lucky in that my husband was at home. My son wasn't actually. He had moved out 3 days before we were shut down.
Oh no,
that was tricky, but you know, we got through that. But suddenly, you know, the Prime Minister was paying me to be at home, and I had all this time and freedom. And I've also really lucky. I have a lovely friend who you might know called Rachel Ashwell.
Yes.
Shabby Chic.
Yes.
So, and I'd met her through Instagram in the early days. And when we were finally open, so when I had time during COVID, you know, because we were locked down for a long time in North Wales, they didn't want us to go anywhere at all. So, you know, it really was, gosh, I can't even remember how many weeks now. It was about 12 weeks or something to start with, and then various times afterwards. You know, but I had all of this time to sit and think, and sometimes that's what you need, isn't it? Time to sit and think. And I'd always thought maybe I could write a book, but actually I didn't. So at school I had dyslexia and struggled and was pretty much told by the primary school teacher I was very stupid in front of the whole class because I wasn't very good at spelling, and that stayed with me. And I think actually that's driven me all my life, even as a 2-year-old now. Just prove that I'm not. But so I never thought I could write a book. You know, when you said right at the beginning, did you ever think, you know, you would do any of these? It was like, no, write a book, absolutely not. But I don't know, somehow that did happen, and somehow I found my voice on Instagram by writing tiny little blogs about the family, you know, and life with a teenager and 2 mental dogs and a husband and a grumpy husband. But, you know, so I found, and then I was taking these photographs, and Rachel Ashwell came to stay. She messaged me and said, "Oh, we're just opening up. Could I come and stay for a couple of days?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course, come up." So she came and stayed, and I was talking to her, and she'd written quite a few books, and I said, I've got to have this mad idea. Do you think it's completely crazy? And she said, no, it's absolutely spot on. I'll introduce you to my publisher.
Oh, wow.
So, and the publisher is Ryan and Peter Small. So they're based here in London, but they've also got offices in New York. So they kind of span, and the rest is history. And that happened really, really quickly. And that pretty much happened because there was a lot of work that I'd already done. You know, my Instagram work, all the photographs I'd already done, you know, went into the book. So that happened really within 6 months. It was written, and because I had the time to do it.
Wow, that's
I love that. But
COVID did that for a lot of people.
A lot of creative people.
Yeah, a lot of my friends, they saw it as a little bit of a gift to really step back and really consider what you really, really want to do with your life and how you want to spend your time.
Yeah, absolutely. And not feel guilty about that either. You know,
Yeah. And the other thing too, I'm sorry, I was going to say too, is that you put it out there. Like sometimes I think we have a fear of just saying what you're thinking about. And, to speak to someone like Rachel Ashwell and say, oh, I'm thinking about writing a book. I mean, but you put it out there. And sometimes just putting it out there, you get that from people who know or like, no, wait a minute. No, this is a good idea. Keep moving, keep going. And then you get the encouragement you need. So yay for you to just share your dream. And because I think when we hide our dreams or we hide our passions, we hide our heart, and you need to put it out there. Just try.
I think you do need to put it out there. I think you do need to say, I visualize things a lot. I visualize everything. I'm a very visual person.
Yeah, right. I can tell by your home. Your home is beautiful.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, well, no, don't want to use that. But anyway, fortunately, I do spend my life arranging and rearranging things. I just have always done that. I guess it's the wax fruit, isn't it? But now they're hot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I visualize how I think I see things working in the future. Mm-hmm. So, I could see the book. I could see how I wanted it to feel. And I think, I say that to people as well. They'll say, oh, I really want to do this. And I'm like, well, you have to visualize what it is you want, I think, and think about that. And then I think you start to make decisions subconsciously, even sometimes, that they'll facilitate the vision that you want. That makes any kind of sense at all.
Totally.
So I don't know, I guess because I'd visualized this book before actually I'd spoke to Rachel about it, but because I could see it, when she then gave me that introduction, I was ready to go. I was ready. I hadn't thought, oh no, I'm not good enough. I mean, I just sort of, I'd been busy in the background sort of thinking, yeah, this could be a thing. This could be a thing one day.
And it's a beautiful thing. And I think, as we started out this podcast, we were talking about how you bloomed initially, and that was at the bank. Boring. I actually worked at a bank to begin with too, and I got you. I know. I did. I was in marketing, and it was suits, and it was the whole 9 yards. So I understand that, but I think just opening yourself up to reblooming along the way, opening yourself up to the possibility of creativity is the biggest gift you can give yourself. And that is what you've done from the very beginning. You've opened your heart. You've said, okay, this is one path, but I'm going to open my heart to really what was fueled and what was your foundation from the very beginning, which was your grandmother's garden, which is beautiful, which is just beautiful. That stayed with you your whole life. And it seems like everything you've done has been, in a way tied to that beautiful, honest, true experience of who you are.
It seems too that I guess for me, this is the case. And I think for you too, Lucy, that you're fine tuning. So you started down the creative path in garden design, but then realized, okay, nope, that's not exactly it. And you're constantly on this journey of fine tuning where you're meant to be and where you're happiest.
I think that's absolutely right, actually, and I'm still doing it now. Yeah, as I said, so I'm sort of thinking, right, okay, I'm going to be 51 next month, so I reckon I've got, hopefully, God willing, another 20 years of real hard work in me to actually keep fine tuning. But we'll see. This global travel might make that a bit shorter.
But it's these chapters, and that's the thing. We have those early chapters where, again, as you said, we wish we could have gone back and been a little smarter about our decisions that we've made. But then I think they help us when we get to these. They are, and by the time we get to this second or third act, we really can make much wiser decisions. And I think that they all go into everything that we do. And certainly that's what Lori and I are passionate about sharing these stories of people who have not only bloomed, but rebloomed along the way. And because I think people think, oh, it just happened. It didn't just happen. It happened through trial and error. It happened through a few wrong turns. It happened through a lot of pivots. It happened through a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been a lot of hard work that went into your landscape business, your photography business. You didn't just wake up as a photographer. You had to practice, as did I, because I'm self-taught too, but there's some joy in learning that. And then the beauty too, I think, are the connections that you make along the way just by putting yourself out there. I've made incredible friends. Oh, huge.
Exactly.
Huge.
I mean, Instagram is, it's a bit of a beast, isn't it? But I would never knock it because it's changed my life. And the people, well, we've met, the people that I've met, well, they've changed my life completely along the way. Incredible friends across the globe. I wouldn't have dreamt of that at all. And I think it's the other thing I think is really important for people is to not only remain curious, but and if there's an opportunity comes along, take it. Just take it and see. So if somebody says, "Would you like to come to Australia?" and I'm thinking, "Oh, it's such a long way," but yeah, I'm going to go. I'm going to go because I don't know what, if I'll get going again or who I'm going to meet there and the things I'm going to see and how that might then influence what I then come home. And that might make me pivot again, so it's fun, isn't it? What a very lucky way. How lucky I am to be able to do that.
How lucky you are to do that, and how lucky we are to have had this session with you. You have shared with us your incredible journey, and we thank you so much. And I love leaving everyone with that last piece of advice, and it's basically say yes. Say yes to the opportunities that come your way, for you never know how you're going to bloom or rebloom in the future. And life is too short not to follow your passions. And Lucy, you have done that every step of the way, and you have inspired us through this podcast. And we thank you so much for joining us today.
I didn't know you before today, Lucy. So this has been really fun learning more about you. And I can't wait to I checked out your Instagram, which is gorgeous. And I'm going to do a deep dive into all your other work. And we're excited to hear about what your next chapter is going to be.
We are. We're going to have to. We'll have to tease that later. Maybe she'll come back on and tell us about that later. I know, another episode 2.0. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this episode of ReBloom. And please take a look at our show notes where you can find links to Lucy's Instagram, her books, and find out a little more information about Lucy and also Lori and myself. And we thank you so much, and peace, love, and rebloom, dear friends. Life is too short not to follow your passions, so go out there and let your heart plant you where you are meant to be and grow your joy.
We will be right here sharing more incredible stories of reinvention with you. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode of ReBloom.
Until next time, I'm Jamie Jameson.
And I'm Lori Siebert.
Peace, love, and rebloom, dear friends. We love to connect with our ReBloom fans. Find us on Instagram at rebloom_podcast or a private Facebook group of ReBloomers. You will find both links in our show notes as well as information about our sponsors. Huge thanks to UrbanStems and Jet Creative for making this episode possible.